Hi, everyone, and welcome to Is DEI a Bad Word? Uncomfortably Comfortable Conversations. I'm your host, Cheryl Lala, a retired professional golfer and current consultant in the business world. On today's show, we welcome Sandra Perez, she, her, longtime nonprofit executive, native New Yorker, and executive director of New York Pride. Welcome, Sandra.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Amazing. Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the show and learn more about your work at New York Pride. Let's kind of start off with how you got started with New York Pride and what are your hopes for the 2024 festival that's soon approaching?
Oh, my goodness. Becoming executive director for New York City Pride about 3 years ago was a dream come true, I will say. I've spent a lot of time in the not-for-profit world. I ran a Latinx cultural center for a very long time. So for me, this was bringing all of my different identities together and putting my work to use for the people I love the most.
In terms of the 2024 festival, tell us a little bit more. I know people can go to the website to kind of check things out, but what's the theme this year?
Well, this year, our official name is Heritage of Pride. Everybody knows this as New York City Pride. It is our 40th anniversary of actually being in charge of the march. And it's the 55th anniversary of Stonewall.
Wow.
Right? All these anniversaries are coming up. And one of the things that we were debating on the theme this year we selected was Reflect, Empower, Unite. We felt it was important to look to where we've come from, really take strength from the struggles that our predecessors had, and use that time to reflect on what we want to do and what we want to see for the next generation. The final step is uniting as a community, as allies, bringing everybody in so that we can make sure that our young people and the people who love them can live freely and without fear.
Absolutely. It must be such a process to kind of come up with the theme every year and to get things together. Walk us through that. Is that...
Oh my gosh, but it's so much fun. It is, it's a little bit unusual. We take so many of these nominations come in from the community from all over the world, all over the country. Same thing goes for Grand Marshals. We have community members weigh in. We all kind of stay on phone calls and Zoom calls too late into the night. But, we vote and it's a democratic process and we try and come up with people who we think reflect the best of our community.
Great. These vital aspects of Pride, you mentioned community grand marshals and the celebrity grand marshals, all of that I'm sure is wrapping up at this moment. What can you tell us about the folks that were selected?
Actually, I can say, because we're slowly revealing them, a real pleasure this year to celebrate so many of our trans siblings. We are able to honor this year Raquel Willis as one of our grand marshals. We also are able to honor and give flowers to Miss Major, who was there at Stonewall. Part of the other aspect of Pride is also we look at celebrities, but we also look at who are our allies, who is out there leading the charge when we're not in the room, right? Because that's just as important with allies. We have Michelle Visage from RuPaul's Drag Race, who has always been there for the community. And then this year we have taken the liberty of not choosing one, but 3 youth grand marshals, because we really think, especially in our 40th year, that this march is about them. We want to lift up the work that young advocates are doing and educate people on the challenges young people have. We've done a lot of fighting, we've done a lot of struggling, and we want to celebrate because we deserve to celebrate. But we also have to remember that it's also about advocating. So that's our approach this year. Have a lot of fun, spread the queer joy, but remember there's work to do.
I love how intergenerational it is, collaborating with the youth and then the elders. It just sounds like it's going to be a wonderful festival. We talk a lot about DEI on this show. In the current political landscape, it seems like DEI has become a bad word. Do you think DEI is a bad word? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely not. It is just kind of a sign of the times when people corrupt the language that we use. When you stop and think about it, why wouldn't people want to celebrate and be more inclusive? We talk about so much of the many challenges that we all face and the many successes that have made this country what it is. And actually, diversity is the main reason for it. At this point in time, to be having this argument tells me that we are winning, actually. And that is why the blowback is so hard. But I do think we are making strides. There are tons of reports that show that DEAI is a success, that businesses who practice it have happier employees, the retention is greater, and the community and consumers feel better about supporting environments that are more inclusive. We have to push hard against that.
Thank you for bringing up all of those points. As we think about the festival and the parade, why do you think it's important every year for the community to show up? Not just, members of the LGBTQI plus communities, but allies as well, as you've talked about them. Why do you think it's important to always support New York City Pride?
It's important always to support New York City Pride because we were one of the first and one of the largest. No offense to my friends out in San Francisco. We're always competing with each other and teasing each other about it. But the reality is that visibility matters. Being able to show our growth, being able to show the breadth and the accomplishments of our community is really what's needed. And while I know there's a lot to be said for how different people celebrate Pride, this is the opportunity for us to talk to people who may not be exposed to the LGBTQIA plus community, who may not have the information or access to resources. We try and leverage what is a moment of queer pride and joy to also educate people and let them know there's a safe space where they will be able to celebrate.
Let's talk about corporations and how they play an important role in all Pride celebrations in terms of offsetting many of the costs that are incurred. I don't think that people quite understand how many costs are incurred when it comes to New York City Pride or even San Francisco Pride. I just had a conversation with Suzanne Ford, the executive director there, and she was walking us through just all of the costs associated nowadays with these festivals. What misconceptions are there out there about corporations participating in these Pride parades?
Until I became really involved with New York City Pride and the Pride March, I kind of thought marches just kind of, magically appeared, right?
Yes.
You don't think about the logistics or anything like that. And since coming on board, I've had a crash course in how difficult and how hard a lift it is. And I know a lot of people have concerns about the corporate community being involved in pink washing. It's a real thing. I do take pride in the fact that we really have stepped away from some sponsors and actually engaged more deeply with others because what we want to have are partnerships. And what we have been able to do with some of our corporate partners is use their dollars to lift up the community members who can't access things. We have a community grants program, and that has enjoyed corporate support, money going directly back into the community. And the majority of our corporate partners are involved with us because they want to celebrate their employees. They want to visibly demonstrate to their employees that they are committed to them and to their communities. Sometimes we forget that. There are many employee resource groups, and they are the ones who are advocating internally to build supports within their corporate structures, as well as to do good work within the community.
I think it makes a lot of sense. It's interesting. In my career, I have worked with quite a few of different ERGs, LGBTQ plus ERGs. And one of the things they internally have said is, why can't my company do more of this stuff year round, not just during Pride Month? How do we get companies and corporations and brands interested in supporting these Pride ERGs throughout the entire year? Do you have any strategies there?
The conversations have been happening. The great news is that we have a lot of our corporate partners who are now saying, hey, we don't want to just be about June, which is great because then, of course, we have all these other programs that most people don't know that we do. We do family movie nights. We celebrate youth and throw workshops for small businesses and entrepreneurs. There's all this stuff that happens behind the scenes year round. Corporations are becoming more attuned to and are willing to join us as we say, hey, let's talk about Pride being year round, because we are doing this year round. It's slow, but I think the realization that they can go beyond the small box. People tend to think in little boxes and check boxes. And
Yes.
And now we're encouraging everybody to ditch the box and be more expansive.
Right. And think outside of June and think about how year-round activations.
We all live intersectional lives, right?
Yes.
We bring multiple identities to work. We're not just LGBTQIA+. We are bringing our ethnic heritage, our religions, whatever it is we bring to the table. And that can be celebrated year-round, and it should.
Absolutely. I have so many fond memories. I think I was telling you before we started recording of New York City Pride. I mean, one, I got married in New York, and I got married on June 20th. And just a few days after that was New York City Pride. And I remember our families and friends going out there. And that was the first time they had experienced Pride, even any Pride.
You say that, and every year we hear these stories of somebody saying, oh, I met my spouse at a Pride, or we come back every year to celebrate our anniversary. I will just say to anybody who's listening, share your story with us. We love to get little videos or know how people have been impacted by Pride. One of the things we always say is that it's always somebody's first Pride.
I was living out there when we had our first child, and she was probably maybe 6 or 8 months old, and we took her to New York City Pride, and I still have photos of it. So that was her first Pride for sure.
So we have a Pride baby. I love it. I love it. Pride babies.
She's 9 now, so it's been a few years. I need to go back to New York. That's for sure.
Well, actually, we have a young person who was, I think, a toddler who got interviewed many, many years ago, and it is now a regular on the route and is always interviewed and talks about, this is where I belong.
That's so fun. Cute. I love that. I love those stories so much. I'll have to dig into more. Let's switch topics and talk about the political atmosphere. Things have become turbulent for the safety of LGBTQ plus communities being at risk. What can people do at the local level to be better allies to one another?
I think part of allyship is really about speaking up. People will say they're allies, but something happens and they don't know where to stand, or they don't know what to do. Certainly in terms of our allies, there's a lot of advocacy that they can be doing alongside us. One of the things I have been greatly inspired by is New York City Pride has a very small staff. What we have are volunteers, and every single one of them, either maybe they're doing it because they're coming out or they want to give back to the community. There are a lot of folks who are an ally, and I want to show up, and I want people to know that I love them as well. Being able to talk to partners outside of the community and invite them in, but also say, hey, it doesn't have to be June to talk to us, right? Mm-hmm. Talk to us year round. The issues that you're dealing with are usually our issues. People still need to be resourced. When we're talking about political issues, we know how there are hundreds of bills in the works that are seeking to limit our rights, the rights of our children and families. That's where allyship can play a pivotal role, because we can't do it on our own. We can advocate, but people need to be alongside us to make that change.
Allyship is also in dollars, donating. Where do community donations fit into New York City Pride?
It's funny because one of the things that I think people don't really know is we don't receive government support. We drive a lot of revenue into the city and the state, and each year we start from scratch.
Wow.
Right. We're working on urging our political leaders to look at this community. There are at least 4 or 5 major prides in this area, and multiple small community organizations that rely on us, or small businesses that rely on us. Again, when we're talking about allyship, when we're talking about corporate partners, and we have to talk about individual people giving back when they can, corporate community, going beyond the donation. I'm talking about engagement. How do you support the community beyond the month of June? The story that people need to know. There are always ways to give back. Cash is great. Time is also valuable. Having people who know what the issues are and can support us in whatever way possible is what we need to bring home.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little personal here. What was it like coming out to your family and friends? What advice do you have for others who are struggling being authentic at work?
I came out multiple times. I think that's the one thing that we don't emphasize enough. It was difficult coming out to my family, but more than that, it was also looking for a place to land, looking for a home space. I always tell people who ask about what advice do I have to folks who haven't come out yet, there is a community for you.
Yeah.
There are people who will love you, support you, and help you find your way. The most liberating thing in the world for anyone, any human being, is to be authentically themselves. Why they don't want to support DEAI, or they have problems with lifestyles or life choices, as though those are subjective things. I just tell them, you live freely. You don't ever have to think about your identity necessarily. But those of us who come from communities of color or who identify as part of the LGBTQ community, and especially our trans brothers and sisters, they are always identified and they are the most marginalized. We need to show up and speak up whenever we can. And there's a community for all of them.
Exactly. The intersectionality. There's so many different facets of even my own identity, being a person of color and then being a queer person, different religions, all of these different ways that I remember thinking about coming out and how difficult it was to have that conversation with family and friends. I'm a retired professional golfer. I played golf in the late 90s, early 2000s. This was a different era of time.
Well, I feel like I should be interviewing you on that experience, seriously, because look at what's happening now in youth sports. There's so much homophobia and transphobia that people are getting to indulge in. And I really feel it's an indulgence. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And having to push back on that and understanding that this isn't about one professional golfer.
Yes.
This is about young people being able to play sports to figure out who they are, period.
Absolutely. I just had this conversation with someone. Oftentimes that narrative gets shifted to older elite athletes, but I'm talking about kids playing sports. Yeah. I'm talking about grade school kids, middle school kids, high school kids. These are still very young kids. All people should have access to sports. It was pivotal for me in my life and my coming out story and my journey to play golf and to be at peace with myself in that journey. Being queer, it took me a long time to come out, but it was because I played sports that I had the strength to stand on my own 2 feet. And I feel like all youth should have access to sports. We're talking about kindergartners, first graders, second graders. Why should they be excluded? Professional
sports has finally gotten the message. We do a youth pride program the day before the march. And one of the things that we have been gratified to see is the number of professional sports teams that are looking to support the community, that want young people to be involved in learning their sport, be it golf, tennis, basketball. It's about getting kids active. There's no hidden agenda in it except, hey, kids deserve to be healthy and figure out who they are. And sports is one of the ways you do it.
Absolutely. And you're in a great place for it. I mean, New York City is the headquarters for so many different sports organizations. It's the reason I lived in New York City. That's what I was doing when I was there. You're in a great place for it. I'm glad that more professional organizations are supporting you in New York City Pride.
But we also know there's a lot of work that needs to happen and a lot of advocacy that needs to be directed to those people who are at the crosshairs right now in terms of the legislation that's coming after participating in sports.
Yes, definitely. Before you go, Sandra, how do people stay up to date with you, up to date with New York Pride? What are your social media handles and best way to connect with you?
Oh my goodness, the best way to connect with us is we have the best handle, nycpride.org. Really
Perfect.
Simple. You can just put in New York City, NYC Pride anywhere, and you will find all of our handles. And we're looking forward to hearing and seeing everybody. Drop us a line, hop onto our Instagram, and check out what we're doing.
I'm sure there's many, but is there any one event that is the one?
Each one has its own joy. We'll tell you, there's nothing like standing down the march route right before it starts and seeing the crowds line up and seeing the excitement people have. And then I go to our street festival, Pride Fest, which is right next to the march. After everybody's done the march, you can go to this street festival. And my goodness, everybody is just, it's free. Everybody's happening. We have family stages. We have really great local acts as well that are lifted up. I love all of it. And I especially love Youth Pride because that's where we all just go in there, and it's just so much fun to see young people feeling safe, celebrated, and living their truth, not being bothered by anybody.
It's amazing. I can't wait to see.
This year, we're going to have Youth Pride at South Street Seaport. We're happy for that partnership, and we want all of our family to celebrate.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Sandra, for being on the show. We can't wait for New York City Pride this year. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Is DEI a Bad Word? We hope you're leaving this conversation with tangible steps to continue fostering an inclusive community for all. Bye, everyone.